Thank you. I now have the distinct honor of introducing two very special guest speakers this morning. First, it is my pleasure to introduce Petty Officer Steve Hohl. Petty Officer Steve Hohl, a retired Navy SEAL, a loving father and husband, and a hero to many. Petty Officer Steve Hohl has served bravely in counterterrorism missions during Operation Enduring Freedom, protected our nation far and abroad, and is a living representation of what it means to be a hero. Secondly, I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Captain Hohl, father of Mr. Steve Hohl, as I just introduced. Captain Hohl was one of the highest-ranking naval officers on the West Coast and has served for more than 40 years, has protected our freedoms that we enjoy today, and it is a pleasure to have them both here today. Mr. Hohl and Captain Hohl, father and son, it is my pleasure to introduce you both. Please help me to welcome these heroes to the stage.
Thank you, Travis. Thank the Student Council, Principal Ramsey, I'm not sure if he's in here, but the school administrators, and everybody who's made this possible. Veterans Day has a special meaning in our family, and over the 40 years that I served, I had an occasion to speak every once in a while on Veterans Day, and I had the prepared remarks that I thought would probably be appropriate if I made a few changes to update them. And I got to thinking, this is the first Veterans Day since my father passed away, so if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the veterans and the Hohl family. A little over 75 years ago, our nation was at war. My father was either going to get called up or volunteer, so he volunteered to join the Navy. He served in the Pacific Theater. He was part of the battle for Okinawa, and then after the war was over, he and his buddies helped find and destroy unexploded ordnance on the island of Okinawa. When his tour was over, he went back home and went back to raising his cattle and horses, started his family, and he had a great life. Here's a picture of Dad just before his 93rd birthday. He loved his horses. He would reenact wagon trains that crossed the prairies and the Morin Trail, the Oregon Trail, a lot of the other wagon trains, and had a tremendous time doing that. That was 75 years ago. About 30 years later, I'd been in college. I'd been studying to be a doctor of veterinary medicine. Did a little bit of rodeoing on the weekends to make a little bit of extra money. And there was a little conflict down in Southeast Asia called Vietnam. So like my dad, I knew I was either going to be drafted or I could enlist and have a little more control over what happened. So I enlisted in the Navy, and I had a friend who had been an enlisted air crewman on board naval aircraft, and so I thought I could probably do that. So here I am a few years later after I acquired a few facial hairs and a few stripes. But here's a picture a few years later with one of the crews I flew with. I decided if I wanted to continue flying, I had to do it where I could make a little more money. So I applied for a commission, became a naval aviator, later commanded a squadron, commanded an air wing, commanded the theater ASW forces responsible for all the aircraft, surface ships, submarines, and underwater sensors looking for Soviet aircraft during the Cold War. I like to tell people that we won the Cold War because we did a great job of keeping track of the Soviet submarines. But I was stationed in San Diego, and most of you may or may not know that the SEALs train in San Diego. So we were there, and my oldest son said, well, I think I can do that. And so I'll let him talk about his story here in a little bit, but I had the pleasure of seeing him complete boot camp. And a few years after that, my youngest son did the same thing. So there's a tradition of naval service in the Hohl family. This is Stephen, when I had the honor of pinning his trident on with his commanding officer after he got his SEAL qualifications. My youngest son became a Navy diver. He traveled the world diving on piers and port facilities where a U.S. warship was going to dock to make sure there were no mines or obstructions that would hinder the vessel. And he was very successful as well. No military family would survive very well without my spouse, and since she's here today, I had to stick a picture in there. But this is Beth and myself at a naval function. The Navy influence rubbed off, and here's Beth with her brother, who also became a naval officer. So the tradition continued in our family. The thing that makes this all worthwhile are pictures like these. This is Stephen's boys on the left, and then this is my daughter's two children on the right. When you finish 40 years and you're living in Hawaii, they have a special way to help you retire. So these are the leis and the festivities that accompany a retirement in Hawaii, and it couldn't have been made any better, but my father and mother were there also. So now, let's see if I can get this to play here. I get to listen to, it doesn't have the voice, but this is my granddaughter. Papa. There she is, calling for Papa to come play. So, with that, I'd like to turn it over to my son and let him talk a little bit about his service. So thank you very much.
Good morning, Westlake. How's everyone doing? Hold on. Good morning to Westlake, everyone except for the football team. I live out in the Bee Cave Lakeway area, and 63 to 21 wasn't very nice, but well done. Good luck moving forward, and maybe next year, right? Travis, student council, staff, thank you for allowing my dad and I to join your Veterans Day event. This is awesome. It's truly an honor to take part. Today is a special day in our family, as my father alluded to. My father, both grandfathers, uncle, little brother, all had the opportunity to serve. Veterans Day gives us an opportunity to reflect on the men and women who raised their hand to commit to something bigger than themselves. It takes a level of courage to leave the familiar comforts of home, friends, family, for the unknown and the very real chance that, or even worse, danger, death that being in the military can bring. I think back to when I joined the Navies in the late 90s. Clearly none of you were born yet. There really wasn't much going on, so I didn't think much of it. Obviously that changed on September 11th. So these young men and women who've joined over the last 20 years have my utmost respect, as they knew exactly what they were getting themselves into, and the bravery is inspiring. As a matter of fact, I told myself growing up I would never join the military. Even though I grew up in a military family, I really didn't see it in my future. Well, it turns out I was wrong. After a lackluster attempt at college, it was clear that I needed a bit more direction and some maturing to do. So Dad and I went down to the recruiter's office. Totally my idea, zero pressure from the old man, I swear. And we signed up. I told the recruiter I didn't want to be on a boat, didn't want to be on a plane. I definitely did not want to be on a sub. And I saw a poster on the way in, recruiting poster, looked something like this. And I said, hey, what about that? I'll give that a shot. And he kind of chuckled and said, no one really makes it through that. I said, all right, well, let me give that a go. Fast forward a few months, boot camp, a BUD screen test, which is a physical fitness test of swimming, running, sit-ups, pull-ups, push-ups, all that sort of thing. In an A school behind me, I checked into BUDs with about 200 plus other guys. It was a bit like Squid Game, right? You're looking around to see who's the strong ones, who are the weak ones, who's going to make it, who isn't going to make it, and who's going to be at the end for the next 6 months. But in our case, you just had to ring a bell, unlike Squid Game, where it's a bit more final. But I will say I learned a valuable lesson those first few days. We had Division I athletes, we had Olympic swimmers, we had world-class triathletes, guys built like Greek statues, and we had guys built like potatoes, skinny dudes, and just guys that are wiry. And more often than not, it was the latter that made it. The don't judge a book by its cover sort of thing. It turns out being cold, miserable, and exhausted levels the playing field. Those who got comfortable being uncomfortable and were strong mentally did the best. For example, like one day at Bud's in first phase, you'd wake up at 4 a.m., you'd clean your room feverishly, because you might have a room inspection that day. It didn't matter how clean your room was, you were going to fail. But if you didn't clean your room, it was going to be way worse. 5 a.m., you'd start with a PT, followed by some surf torture. I don't know if you guys have been to the water in Southern California. It's beautiful out, but the water is cold. The next evolution would be a soft sand conditioning run. We never knew how long we would run or how far we went. We just ran until the instructor said we could stop. The next evolution would be a 2-mile timed ocean swim, then a run through the O course, followed by some log PT, and then inevitably we'd get some extra attention from an instructor who was having a bad day, most likely girlfriend problems, and we would get wet and sandy again, and more physical conditioning. Last evolution of the day, over to the pool for some drown proofing, hands and feet tied behind your back, getting comfortable in the water, underwater knot tying, breath holding, running everywhere, of course, with a boat on our heads, so much so that by the end of it, you had a bald spot on top of your head, so you had a bunch of 19, 20-year-olds going bald way before they should have been going bald. And then so it's 12, 13 hours of constant movement, aside from the brief, and I mean brief interludes for breakfast and lunch. But we thankfully had most evenings off so we could heal and get ready for the next day. At first, I didn't know why the instructors called everything an evolution. I figured that's just what they called stuff at Buzz. It wasn't an event, it wasn't an activity, it was just an evolution. I'm not sure if it was a lack of clarity or a rare moment of, if it was a lack of sleep or a rare moment of clarity, but it hit me. It was called an evolution because we were evolving. Over the course of the 6 months, we were slowly and painfully going from tadpoles to frogmen. And of the 200 guys that started, about 28, 30 of us graduated. So I had made it, right? I was a hairy-chested, rootin', tootin', shootin', parachuting frogman. Nope, unfortunately not even close. It had just begun. I still had a long way to go if I was to become a SEAL. There was SEAL tactical training, jump school, Trident board to pass, and specialty training, and so on. I would eventually get there, but I realized that the learning, training, and growing really never stops. That lesson, and more importantly, that frame of mind still sticks with me today. How can I continue to be a better husband, a better father, a better son? How do I continue to try to be a better version of myself? I think we should look at every task or problem as an evolution. Whether we succeed or fail, we had the courage to try, and we'll learn something that will make us better tomorrow than we were today. So on this Veterans Day, we can thank a service member for their service, for their bravery and strength, leaving home for fighting for our country. Or better yet, we can thank a veteran by continuing to evolve individually. Each of us constantly working to be better and collectively becoming something truly worth fighting for, so that we may enjoy the freedoms that our country affords us. Because that's what our veterans fought for, to protect our way of life, for their families and ours. As John F. Kennedy said, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. May God bless you all, and may God bless America.